These guys don't. Partial correlation analysis shows that with saturated fat constant, there was no significant correlation between dietary sucrose and the incidence of coronary heart disease. Now, you heard me remand this young lady here from believing in the China study. Because why? Univariate analysis. Okay? Now, this is a partial correlation analysis. What the hell is a partial correlation analysis? Never heard of it. When you do a multivariate linear regression analysis, what you have to do is you have to take one factor and hold it steady, constant, and show that factor A constant, and then show factor B does not work. Then you switch it around and you hold factor B constant and show that factor A still works to explain the relationship. Everybody got it? You do it both ways. Well, he only did it one way. He did a partial correlation analysis. What does that mean? Do you believe this?
It means he was avoiding looking at part of the data that didn't support his argument.
Well, that's what we assume, but we don't know that because he's dead.
Okay, well, it leads you to the conclusion.
It leads me to the conclusion that I can't trust this. That's what it leads me to. Okay? But we based 40 years of nutritional information, policy, and consumption on the basis of this fact right here, which is not a fact. In fact, if anything, it's not even remotely reasonable. But that's what we did. And so, of course, this led to the low-fat craze of the 1980s, which is still with us. And if you ask most dietitians, including dietitians at UCSF, is low-fat good for you? They'll tell you yes. I will tell you that if it says low-fat, it's poison. Low-fat equals poison. And this is exactly what has gone wrong. And I will say it on camera if anybody wants me to. There's a camera right there. Poison. Poison. Because the content of low-fat home-cooked food can be controlled. You can decide how much fat you want to add in the recipe, how much olive oil, etc. But low-fat processed food tastes like purple. Because the flavors in the fat. You take the fat out, it tastes like, it tastes nasty. Okay? I mean, think of milk. Okay? Whole milk. That's what I grew up on. It tasted fine, and everybody drank it at school. It was no problem. But low-fat milk or skim milk tastes like dishwater.
Unless you add sugar.
Unless you make it chocolate milk, right? You add the sugar, exactly right. So you have to substitute. You can't just leave it low-fat. You have to substitute. Well, with what? Well, with high fructose corn syrup or sucrose. And here's an example. Here's Snackwells. They're still with us. 2 grams of fat down, 13 grams of carbohydrate up, 4 of which are sugar. So the question is, which was worse, the fat or the sugar? In addition, when you go low-fat, you're going low all fat. You know, there are 7 classes of fats. There's omega-3s, which are heart healthy, and will save your life. And then there's trans fats, which are the devil incarnate, which will kill you. They're both 9 calories per gram. But when you go low-fat, you're taking away the omega-3s and the trans fats. Now, is that a good thing to do? Not really, because you need those fats. In fact, saturated fat is important for building membranes. And it has now been shown that saturated fat has nothing to do with cardiovascular disease. The American Heart Association has debunked the fat hypothesis. They have taken it back in 2010. It does not exist anymore. But that's what many people continue to espouse. This is the new nutrition, the NEW nutrition. Okay? You need to understand, nutrition is a moving target. Okay? But you need to not be vested in old policy. Here's an example of what I was talking about. Here's Brooklyn Farms low-fat milk. 130 calories, 15 grams of sugar, all lactose. Milk sugar, no problem. Here's Berkeley Farms 1% chocolate milk. 190 calories, 29 grams of sugar, all high fructose corn syrup. So when you consume a chocolate milk, you're consuming a glass of milk plus a half a glass of orange juice. The question is that okay? Is that a good thing to do? Which was worse for you, the fat or the sugar?
Sugar.
Good. And then finally, number 5, political wind. The 3rd worst hurricane in American history. And it never even hit our shores. Everybody knows Katrina and Sandy. This is the 3rd worst. This is Hurricane Allen. Never hit America, but it wiped out the entire Caribbean sugar crop in one fell swoop in 1980. food industry went, oh my God, where are we going to get our sugar fix from? We need a sugar that's homegrown, that's available all the time, that we can immediately access. It was called high fructose corn syrup. That's what started its appearance in foods in America. To the point where by 1985, the transformation was complete, and we ended up with this stuff, New Coke. Anybody remember New Coke? Anybody old enough to remember the story of New Coke? You remember, right, Joel?
Absolutely.
We revolted because it was so sweet, it was disgusting. So they brought back Coke Classic for about 3 years, okay? And then all of a sudden, Coke Classic disappeared. You know why? Under the radar. We're all drinking this stuff now. It's just called Coke. New Coke is Coke. That's what they did. So as far as I'm concerned, the food supply of America has been adulterated under our very noses and with our tacit approval. The addition of fructose for palatability, especially with decreasing fat, and also ostensibly as a browning agent. That browning that we see, the reason they put it in bread, they say, is to brown the bread better. Well, that's called the Maillard reaction. The Maillard reaction is what makes hemoglobin A1C. Now, you're all familiar with hemoglobin A1C, right? Is a high hemoglobin A1C good for you or bad for you? Bad for you, right? Because what that is that's binding of glucose to proteins, causing changes in flexibility that changes basement membrane functioning, which allows for atherosclerosis. And every time that reaction occurs, it's non-enzymatic, every time that reaction occurs, a reactive oxygen species is given off, a little hydrogen peroxide, which can do cell damage, can cause lipid peroxidation, or protein unfolding, or cell death, unless it's quenched by an antioxidant. And that's the reason why we have antioxidants, is to take care of the reactive oxygen species that we normally produce as part of normal daily cellular metabolism. But when you make more of them, you have more chance for damage, which is what happens in diabetes. That's why diabetes causes all these problems, is the Maillard reaction, the browning reaction. Everybody with me? Well, it turns out fructose causes that browning reaction 7 times faster than glucose. 7 times faster. So, you are all browning even as we speak right now. And if you had orange juice this morning, you're browning 7 times faster. Yeah.
Does the fact that fructose bypasses the regulation step in glycolysis
Yes.
come into play here
Absolutely.
somewhere?
That's part of the toxicity.
Okay,
That's why it causes liver fat accumulation. Absolutely, yes. So we're not going to do the whole science of that because this is a policy talk. But that's what I talked about last year, is how fructose generates liver fat, which generates insulin resistance. And that's what the Lou Cantley article is about. Okay. All right, so now we're talking about toxicity. So remember this graph. Remember the 1,000% increase in fructose in sugar. Now let's talk about what does fructose or sugar actually do. Does sugar cause weight gain? Is sugar responsible for obesity? So this is from Mozafarian, Harvard School of Public Health in the New England Journal 2 years ago. This is the nurses' study and the physician study. And you'll notice the 2 items that cause the most weight gain are potato chips and French fries. Potato chips and French fries cause the most weight gain. And it makes sense because they're both carbohydrate and fat at the same time. Notice where sugar is. Sugar sweeteners, distilled desserts. Distant third. Distant third. Now, we have correlative data that says that sugar-sweetened beverage consumption increases weight gain in toddlers, and prospectively, juice consumption increases BMI Z-score in toddlers as well. So, this is correlative data, not causative data. This is the best we could do. These are meta-analyses of studies where they lowered sugar or raised sugar. And here's your diamond, and here's your identity line. And you'll notice the diamond does not cross the identity line, which means the effect is significant. So sugar does cause weight gain. But when you do the math, it's worth about 0.8 BMI points. 0.8. Well, we have about a 7 to 8 BMI point problem. So sugars are responsible for about 10% of the total obesity problem in terms of weight gain. Everybody with me? And if you take sugar away, does it change your weight? The answer is, yeah, a little bit. So this is a study where they took sugar-sweetened beverages away from kids, and you can see that the BMI went down a little bit, just barely significant. Although in certain populations more so. You can see here for Latinos, because they consume more sugar beverages, it was much greater. Okay? So the question is, does sugar cause weight gain? The answer, yeah. Is sugar a cause of obesity? In some, no doubt. Is sugar the cause of obesity? Not even close. Not even close. Okay? Not the cause, a cause. There are many causes, including iPads and iPods and all those other things too. Okay? But here's the problem. Who cares? Because obesity is not the problem. You don't die of obesity. It doesn't show up on your death certificate. Obesity costs nothing. It's the diseases that travel with obesity that are the problem. That's where the money goes, and that's called a metabolic syndrome. And in particular, we're going to talk about diabetes. That's where the money goes. And that's what's breaking the bank of all the healthcare resources of all of these countries, developed and developing. Who gives a flying you-know-what about obesity? I'm the head of the obesity program. I don't care. People say, fix the obesity and the metabolic disease will improve. Garbage. It's the other way around. Fix the metabolic disease and the obesity will improve. Because when you fix the metabolic disease, insulin goes down. When insulin goes down, you're not shunting sugar and fat, you lose weight of your own volition. We do it every day over in the Watch Clinic. I just did it. I just had clinic just now, and every kid is doing better because we get the insulin down, because we changed the diet, not because we told them to eat less. We changed the diet, and we're all losing weight, more energy, feeling better, and their behaviors are better in school. Fix the metabolic dysfunction, the obesity will improve, and that is something you do not learn. So that's why I'm giving you this talk. This is the most important thing I will teach you. This is the next most important thing I will teach you. Everybody thinks it's about obesity. It is not. And this will prove it. So this is a Venn diagram of the adult American population. 30% obese, 70% normal weight. And the standard mantra is, it's all about obesity. It's the obese person's fault because 80% of the obese population is sick, metabolically ill, with type 2 diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and dementia. All draining healthcare resources. It's their fault. And if they would only just eat less and exercise more, we wouldn't have this problem. It's their fault. That's what this says. This is wrong. This is a mistake. This does not work. Here's why. Yes, 80% of the obese population is metabolically ill, but that means 20% are not. 20% of the obese population is completely metabolically normal. They will live a completely normal life, die at a completely normal age, not suffer any of these ravages or consequences, and not cost the taxpayer a friggin' dime. Not their fault. Conversely, up to 40% of the normal weight population have the exact same metabolic dysfunctions as do the obese. They have insulin resistance, they have type 2 diabetes, they have hypertension, they have dyslipidemia, they have cardiovascular disease, they have cancer, they have dementia. They all get those too, but they're normal weight. So they go to the doctor, the doctor says, well, you're normal weight, no problem. Big problem. Big problem. Because they have the same metabolic dysfunction. So when you do the math, 57 million obese sick people, 67 million normal weight sick people. You do the math, that's 124 million. That's more than half the US population. This is for everybody. This is not just for the obese. Everybody thinks it's about obesity. It's not. It's about everybody. And that means it's not about behavior because it's not about obesity. Because obesity, of course, is you eat too much, you exercise too little. It's your fault. It's your behavior. This is an exposure. Because normal weight people get it too. So let's go back to the last public health crisis we experienced in this country, HIV. 1979, patient 0. 1981, the term AIDS gets coined. 1986, Coop says, we got a problem. When did HIV become a public health crisis? What year? What year did HIV become a public health crisis? Come on, Joe.
I think it depends on who you ask.
No, there's a date. There's a date. It's November 12th, 1991.
I think you would get an argument saying that people in the gay community thought it was a public health crisis long before that.
When it was an American public health crisis. When the average guy on the street thought it was a public health crisis. Not the gays and the addicts. That's the problem. Up to the point, up to 1991, everybody thought it was about the gays and the addicts. It's their problem, not ours. On November 12th, 1991, it became our problem. What happened? Magic Johnson got HIV. And everybody said, holy, it could happen to me. This could happen to anyone. And everybody realized that everyone was at risk because it's an exposure, not a behavior. And exposures require a public health response, and it became a public health crisis. This is the same thing. This is the same thing. This is a public health crisis, and it's not about obesity. It's about chronic metabolic disease, because that's what's breaking the bank. These guys are breaking the bank more than these guys are breaking the bank. It's for everyone. Now, in order to prove my point, I have to say that this is not about calories. Because if it's about calories, why would you pick on sugar? You pick on everything, just like Coca-Cola said in Coming Together, right? It could be carrots. It could be cheesecake. Who says it's Coca-Cola? Who says it's sugar? After all, potato chips and French fries are number 1 and number 2. Pick on them. So what I have to show you is that there is a specific toxicity. Now, the definition of toxicity is the degree to which a substance can damage an organism. It does not distinguish between acute versus chronic toxicity. And what I have to then have, these are the caveats that I have to prove to you, that it's exclusive of calories. Now, can anybody think of a nutrient that is toxic beyond its calories? Is there one out there where the calories are irrelevant? It's toxic by itself. Sure. Alcohol. Alcohol is not toxic because of its calories. Alcohol is toxic because it's alcohol. Right? It's got to be exclusive of obesity, because if it's just making you fat and that's what's making you sick, then it's not toxic. It's just calories. Got to show human data, right? Can't be animals. And it has to be in doses routinely consumed, right? Not something over the top. These are my caveats. I have to prove these to you in order to go forward.
Why does that have to be exclusive of obesity? When you said earlier
Yes, it
that-
does. If it's going to be specifically toxic, it does. Otherwise, it's just obesogenic.
Well,
That
you
doesn't make
said
it
that-
toxic.
Oh, sure. But it doesn't have to be exclusive of obesity.
If I'm going to be able to do something from a public health standpoint, it has to be. Damn right it has to be. Oh, yeah. So this is what's going on worldwide. World sugar consumption has tripled over the past 50 years. Now, per capita consumption, notice Brazil. Brazil used to be has always been a sugar exporter from time immemorial, but it was never a sugar consumer because they were too poor to afford their own sugar. Well, now they're not so poor. Now they have Embraer jets and biodiesel and, World Cup and Olympics and, they're like, they're a BRIC country, right? Right? Everybody know BRIC? Brazil, Russia, India, China, right? Okay, they got money. Well, they have the highest rate of increase of type 2 diabetes in the world because they can now afford their own sugar. They don't have the highest prevalence of type 2 diabetes. That is reserved for Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, and Malaysia. Why is that? Why do they have the highest prevalence of diabetes in the world? No alcohol. But they got soft drinks like they're going out of style. Because it's hot, and water supply is a question mark, and no alcohol. This is their reward. This is their reward. This is how they reward themselves, and they reward themselves at least 10 times a year. But I would rather have alcohol than stuff. Why would I rather have alcohol? Because you can only drink yourself under the table once a day. But soft drinks, fiesta. And here's the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. It's pretty bad, right? Oh, yeah, I mean, we're bad over here, but for these guys. So I have to show you that sugared sweetened beverages and/or sugar consumption total causes diabetes exclusive of its calories. So this is a study from EPIC Interact study from Europe, where they looked at that and adjusted for total energy intake and BMI, and showed that every sugar sweetened beverage consumed increased your risk for diabetes by 29%. Now this is still prospective correlative, it's still not causative. Everybody got that? So we're not at causation yet, but this is pretty darn good. So this is a study we did that was published this past year in February in the journal PLOS ONE. And what we did was we took 4 international databases and melded them together. First, we took the Food and Agriculture Organization Statistics database, called FAO-STAT, where they have total calories for each country, for each day, each year, fruits excluding wine, oils, roots, tubers, pulses, nuts, and vegetables for fiber-containing foods, meat, cereals, and finally sugar, sugar crops, and sweeteners as separate items for each country for each year. We then melded that with the International Diabetes Federation Statistics database for diabetes prevalence by country, year by year, for the whole decade, 2000 to 2010. And then we melded that with the World Bank Gross National Income database to control for GDP, for poverty, urbanization, aging, physical activity, and obesity. Got it? So we adjusted for all the things you can adjust for, including total calories and obesity, and everything else. Here's the data. Here's the effects model. Notice it doesn't cross the line. Significant. Highly significant. So for every 100 calories consumed as sugar, and sugar was the only item in the food supply that correlated, nothing else did. Predicted also, I'll show you that. For every 100 calories consumed as sugar, diabetes prevalence went up country by 0.87%. Here's the adjusted model of sugar with diabetes prevalence. Here's your take home. This is what you need to know. Only changes in sugar availability predicted changes in diabetes prevalence. Nothing else even came close. Every extra 150 calories total that any country consumed increased diabetes prevalence by a total of 0.1%. Nothing. But if those 150 calories happen to be a can of soda, diabetes prevalence increased 11-fold, by 1.1%. And in America, we're not consuming 1 soda, we're consuming 2.5. So increase this to 2.4%. Given that our current diabetes rate in America is 8.3%, that means that 29% of diabetes in America today is due to sugar and sugar alone. Nothing else. Sugar and sugar alone, 29%. You want something actionable? There it is, yeah.
I have one challenge with all this, and it's not that I disagree with the data or what you're saying, but within cans, they're lined, cans that
Cans.
soda's being consumed within is lined with plastic.
Right.
And the sodas are generally consumed in either a can or a plastic bottle. The research on BPA,
Yeah, sure.
bisphenol A, is showing that it increases insulin resistance, is
Right.
not necessarily the cause, but a complicating factor in all this.
I actually do research on BPA, so I'm
Okay.
very clear on it. I actually work
Okay.
over with the people at UC Berkeley on BPA. We know what the data on that is.
Okay, so
The
I'm
point is,
just
this is
curious how
sugar
they-
availability, and it's in everything, not just soft drinks.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that, this would discount that as being an issue. Now, the EPIC Interact study, you could say that that was an issue, but there's not much, they don't line their soft drink cans with BPA in Europe, only here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that wouldn't have
Okay.
accounted for that either. So I would say that BPA is a red herring in this story. In this
Okay,
story.
fair enough.
Okay.
I just was curious.
There is data on BPA. We actually have it, it's being published in Environmental Health Perspectives like next month. The first author is Goldberg.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so look for that. Okay?
Thank you.
The point is, this study meets the criteria for causal medical inference. and this is really important to talk to about to this group. Okay? You guys are in the CTSI program, and I'm delighted because you have to be our next set of investigators. And I am delighted, but I need to explain something to you. There are 4 kinds of proof. What are they? 4 kinds. There's anecdotal data, garbage. N of 1 does not count. There is correlation. Correlation is not causation. Correlation is discovery. Why? Because correlation means one snapshot in time, and you don't know directionality. You don't know which way the directionality goes. You don't know what caused what, right? So it's discovery. It's a good place to jump off to do good causative studies, but you can't prove anything from a correlation. Then you have this thing called scientific proof. That's where randomized controlled trials come. Everybody believes those because you have a control group, right? You have a naive group, etc. And that's great when you can do them. But you know what? Sometimes you can't do them. Why can't you do them sometimes? Because
Nothing takes place in
they're
isolation.
long-term, they're expensive as all hell, and often they're unethical. So let me ask you a question. Do you believe in global warming? Why? You got proof? Got a control group? Do you believe that football trauma causes chronic traumatic encephalopathy? Why? Got a control group? Do you believe that tobacco causes lung cancer? Why? Got a control group? Have you ever taken a bunch of anybody taken a bunch of naive patients, gone smoking for 50 years and saw what the incidence of lung cancer was? None of these have scientific proof. Even to this day, there's no scientific proof for tobacco and lung cancer. What we have is called causal medical inference. Causal medical inference, where you can demonstrate the changes in the environment that go with the changes in the disease process you're studying, and you can show that nothing else explains it. Okay? That's called causal medical inference. 10% of what we know in medicine today is scientific proof, randomized controlled trials, 10%. That means 90% is causal medical inference. 90% is causal medical inference. This is causal medical inference that sugar causes diabetes, because we showed dose effect, duration effect, directionality. Those countries where sugar went up increased their diabetes. Those countries where sugar went down, and there were a few, decreased their diabetes rates. And most importantly, precedence, because we had the whole decade. We had the movie. We didn't have the snapshot. We had the movie. And it turned out that when sugar changed in any given country, diabetes rates changed commensurately 3 years later. And in order to prove causation, you have to show proximate cause. You have to show that something preceded something else. We showed it. Everybody with me? Causal medical inference. Now, Joel back there, his job is to teach you scientific proof and how to design studies and how to interpret causal data. And I agree. And if you can get it, that's great. What do you think the chances are that we're going to be able to take people who are naive and all of a sudden put them on high sugar diets for the next 50 years and monitor that and know what they're eating, since we don't even have a biomarker for sugar consumption? What do you think the chances are that we're going to be able to do that study? We have enough now. We have enough now. Okay? Causal medical inference is valid. But food industry will say, oh, no, no, not valid. We need more research. And why do they say that? Because they don't like the answer. Okay? It's moving the goalposts. We'll never have enough research for the food industry. No amount of research we will ever do will be enough for the food industry. And they will call for scientific proof because they know it's unattainable. Keep that in mind. Okay? You have to know where to draw the line. You have to know what constitutes enough proof to act. And policy usually requires less than optimal proof, especially in humans. But you got to deal with it. Abuse. Does sugar cause addiction? What do you think? The whole